Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that aims to address divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles and from their experience, and to give their opinions and to debate them. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, we're discussing blended families, and I'm joined by Sophia Rantzau. Sophia is a qualified counsellor and has worked with many parents, children and blended families. Having her own blended family, Sophia honestly shares her wins and mistakes as a stepmum in her book. She does this along with providing guidance, reassurance and a bit of humour to enable you to enjoy your wins too. Sophia lives in Storrington, West Sussex, with her husband and their two cats, Cotton and Bud. Her stepson now refers to her as the best stepmum in the world. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you, Kate, for inviting me today for the podcast.
That is quite an accolade, the best stepmum in the world. I mean, wow. You must be very proud when you hear that.
Absolutely. When I saw that come through, and particularly with my middle stepchild, we've had a difficult relationship, and to receive that was, a really big wow from me, I have to say. And I had to screenshot it just in case I happened to accidentally delete the text or something.
Well, listen, we'll talk a little bit more about the different relationships with different children. But first, let's start by just talking about what is a blended family?
So a blended family is when they refer to the term as nuclear, which is a mum, dad and children. So it's the family, the sort of biological family. And when they separate and you then have a new adult into that life, into that family, that's what we call blended family.
Okay, so a blended family can be many different things, and it can be a dad coming in or a mum coming in. Can it just be children coming in? Would that make a blended family?
I think it's more when there's a new adult coming in as opposed to a child, because if it's an adopted child, then you'd want that to be part of the nuclear family.
Okay, so blended family is when a new adult joins. Okay, so I guess that throws up many challenges and difficulties as well as joys. What are the key challenges then when you're introducing a new adult?
I think for me, one of the biggest things is when you've got a new partner, you're going to realistically want to have them part of your life quicker than you may realise. Or because with blended families, there may be a situation with the children 1 week in one family home, 1 week in the other, or it could be longer than that. So limited time might be with your new partner. And what tends to happen is people can almost rush to get that new adult into their family and for their children to have that adult as part of their family. And sometimes I want to say, put the brakes on. That's a big thing for me.
Okay, so people want to rush. So they're happy with their new partner. They want to share that happiness with the children, but perhaps the children aren't ready.
Absolutely. In my book, I talk about, imagine going on a ride so say, for instance, you're going to London for the day and you're going to surprise your children. So what happens is the children don't know that, but because of where they are, they're going to meet you halfway along on the train journey. So maybe say, for instance, they get on at 3 bridges on the way to London. When they don't realise they're getting to London. But what I'm saying is you may have got on at Chichester and you already know your partner, you've spent time with them and you're enjoying the idea of getting to London. But what happens is the children are coming in at 3 bridges. They haven't had that build-up of getting used to terms of having this new adult in their life. They may still be getting used to the idea of not having their other parent in that life. And I think sometimes it can be too quick to sort of enforce this blended family. And I also want to say, date and enjoy being a couple before you throw in the dynamics and logistics of a blended family.
Right. Okay. So the timing sounds really important. And is the timing the same for everybody? Because presumably different children will accept a new adult at different points of their age development and how they're attached to their other parent.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any sort of hard and fast rule. I do feel it's really important, though, to have these conversations with your children and to be open to what they're going to say. Some of them, for me in my situation, so my husband's got 3 children and the youngest is also called Sophie, and she was really keen to meet me, and she said she wanted to invite me around for coffee, which was very grown up. She was only 9, and she really wanted to meet me, whereas our middle child, my husband's middle child, he really didn't want to. He really wanted to put the brakes on, but they weren't consulted.
Right. So what happens then in that scenario where you've got one child who's really keen and one child who's less so? How do you navigate that as a blended family?
I mean, I always go on about communication and communicate to both what it means for the younger person to meet this adult, and for Sophie, it was very much about wanting to meet this other person in their dad's life, and they didn't want to be excluded from that. And I think for instance, my middle stepson, I think it would have been helpful to have reassured him that he didn't have to like me. It wasn't a given that he had to like me. And asked him to be polite when I'm there and say hello, but he didn't have to, open me with welcome arms and, suddenly start loving this new female adult in his life. So I think it's really about communication and accepting that maybe some of the children are going to challenge that, but that's okay. They're coming from a different place.
So is it all right to introduce a new adult at different times to different children then? It doesn't have to be one big event where everybody meets at the same time, or does it?
I feel that can be really good. Again, if you were to speak to each child individually, ask them how they feel about it. I remember working with one client and they were talking about how to introduce themselves to their new family and the children. And one of the children really liked dog walking. The others, probably preferred to be at home playing on their Xbox or whatever it was. And so actually going for the dog walk with one child on their own felt less intimidating. It felt easier because they were out in the fresh air. They also had a dog to distract as well. So, and again, sometimes it's like anything, isn't it? We could have, like for instance, Christmas is coming up and people will be, potentially forced together, or, you have to invite these people, and suddenly there's this pressure on to perform or be a certain way. And if you're suddenly like meeting, dad's new partner or mum's new partner, it's a lot of pressure, particularly for a young person. And so if it can be as easy as possible, great, do it as easy as possible. That's what I would say.
So do you think it's better to avoid these big Christmas events then for first introductions and do it in a more low-key manner? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I feel that'd be really, really helpful. But again, if you speak to the children and they say, no, great, have them round, that's fine. Again, it's all about communication, asking them how they feel about it. And as much as you might be desperate to have your partner stay with you on Christmas Day, maybe it might be that they pop in or they spend some of the time. But again, it's important to spend time separately with your children also, so that they're not being, what they may feel, being pushed out.
You talked a bit about your own experience there, Sophia, and it sounds like a lot of, what you practice and how you help people is really drawing from real practical experience of having done this. What big howlers did you make then? Tell us kind of the warts and all version. What would you like to go back and change if you could?
I would definitely like to go back and change probably my tantrums that I had. So basically, I'm from a divorced family, and not having had counselling when I was younger, I didn't realise that my 15-year-old self was still angry and inside me. It wasn't until I later qualified and trained to become a counsellor. And so, which was quite helpful because that sort of ran parallel along me blending into my family. But at the time, I didn't realise that when I was getting angry with my 15-year-old stepchild, it was meeting my 15-year-old hurt self from my family's divorce. So I would love to go back and be an adult, because there were times when I really wasn't, and I'm not proud of those moments, but thank goodness we got through them.
So what allowed you to get through them? So, there'll be people listening who have got similar circumstances where they're at the point of introducing new partners and creating their new blended families. What really enabled you to keep going? So it wasn't an easy road. It sounds like it was rocky, like all our great life experiences are, aren't they? But what helped you carry on?
To be honest, it was great that I communicated a lot with my now husband. We definitely talked a lot about how we were each feeling. And if I said to him, I'm struggling today, then I would say, I need you to do this, or I need help with this. So that was really, really helpful. The other things that I did is I was consistent. So I was constantly the same person every time they arrived. So we had a refresh, was 5 p.m. Monday was our refresh time. So every time I was exactly the same. I didn't change, no matter how horrendous the previous week may have been. I was still really, really consistent. And because I wanted to reassure them that I wasn't going to go anywhere, I wasn't going to disappear, abandon them, or anything like that. So for me, it was consistency, even though that was tough at times, believe me.
Yeah, I bet. So it's more, so you didn't hold things over, you didn't allow the hiccups that you'd had in previous weeks or whatever to colour how you then interacted with them the next time you saw them.
No, I mean, I'm human, so sometimes some of the things that happened, they stuck with me, and I think, yeah, that wasn't too nice how that was said, or how that behaviour was. But I had to just believe that we were going to get through this. And I just, whilst I may hold a couple of things or may be aware of how the previous week had ended, I just thought, right, let's reset, let's start again. And that's what I would do.
So I guess one of the common things you hear and see a lot of the time, or you experience doing this kind of work, is when one of the children says to you, you can't tell me what to do, you're not my mum. How do you handle those kind of situations? What's your advice to people?
So I would say it's coming from a place that, they're possibly not able to articulate actually what they mean by you're not my mum, or, they might not be able to make sense of actually, why are you telling me to do this? Because my own mum even asked me to do this. And so as much as that can really be hurtful, and I want to say, to be honest, it happens. I mean, in nuclear families, they don't say, you're not my mum, but what they do tend to say is, I hate you or something, which is
yes.
really hurtful. So it's, it happens. It's just a different sort of selection of words. But for me, if they're saying you're not my mum, you can acknowledge that. You can say, I'm aware I'm not your mum. I'm just asking you to please do ... or to say, I can hear you're upset about what I've asked, and walk away. Really important, walk away. And I would phone that friend that will let you listen, let you shout out to them. Or if you grab the dog, go for a walk, or maybe say, I need to nip to the shops, I've just forgotten something, and jump in the car and drive down the road, and allow yourself that space, because it's hurtful. Hearing those words can be really hurtful.
So it sounds like what you're trying to do is to avoid going head to head at all costs, because it sounds like that's never going to end well, really.
Yeah, so what's going to happen if you end up going head to head? It's probably going to end up messy, and you're not going to feel great, and the child's certainly not going to feel great. So for me, one of the things that I really try to encourage parents that I work with is to say, we don't know what's going on in that little person's head or big person's head when they're saying those words. So as much as it hurts, stop, walk away. And then at some point, when it's calmed down, say to them, when you said I wasn't your mum, what did you mean by that? Or what did I do to provoke that? And again, it's communication.
Yeah, okay. And presumably, if you're going head to head with a child, that puts an incredible strain on your partner relationship. Tell me a little bit about how the partner relationship plays out when you're struggling.
Well, when you're struggling, what can be really difficult, say, for instance, if it's the biological parent and they're witnessing their new partner having a head-to-head with their child, they can be really torn between rescuing their child or their new partner, and also wondering, if they do try to rescue the other one, what will that cause as well with either the partner or the child? Or you love her more than me, or, you look after, your children, you always think about your children and never consider what they did to me or something. So it's really tricky. And I think, again, that's one of the things that I was fortunate enough with my partner and now husband, is that we talked about those situations, even if we didn't feel that either of us got it right at the time, we would talk about it afterwards and work out what we need to do during that time. So if that happens again, how can we manage it differently? So always to take each situation as an isolated situation, as opposed to, when they did that, it's kind of like, they did that, this is how we managed it. Okay, let's try a different tactic next time, for instance.
Okay. So you're creating that parenting team still, aren't you, where you're both, singing from the same hymn sheet, you're both having a consistent approach to them all the time and communicating with each other behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. Consistency is really, really important. Definitely being in the same team is equally important. And, as I say, it's not about good cop and bad cop. You need to be the same cops.
And what about the other parents then in a blended family? So you've got the family that you're in with the children, and then you've got the children's other parents. What are the typical sort of falling over points with that relationship?
I feel it's down to how the now separated parents communicate and talk about the other parent. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times when parents separate and they are unable to be amicable to each other because of whatever may have gone on. And it can be really detrimental to the children to hear, your mother did this or your father did that, and that's not really helpful. And I think that can be a really, it's kind of mudslinging. And as much as you might want to say things about that person, again, keep to adult ears only. Share that again with your new partner or talk to friends or family about it. But I think for me, it can be sort of throwing the words to each other, but it could also be trying to sometimes outdo each other, or, different boundaries and rules in each house. So one person might allow your child to have sleepovers during a school week and the other might not. And then that can be really tricky and confusing for the young person as well, because it's like, but mum lets me.
Yeah. And so do you think it's better for the adults to meet and to talk about introducing partners, or is that a step too far?
Again, it's a really interesting one. I was working with a client and they had a WhatsApp group that was all and some of the family members. So there was their two parents, their parents' new partners, but a previous partner, if you can bear with me,
Yeah.
their husband, ex-husband, was also on the WhatsApp group. And so when a situation came up with the children, one of the parents would pop it on and say, we've had this situation happen today, say, for instance, with Sophia. And I was working with a young person and they said, I don't want these 5 adults discussing me. I actually want to be with each parent or with each adult when I'm with each adult. So again, it's about finding that balance, and it's, it's down to everyone how it works, and to work out what works for that family is what I would say.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we're always sort of encouraging parents to share information between them about the children. But yeah, it's a really interesting point, because there comes a time in a child's life where they don't want you to automatically share the stuff that goes on with you and them with the other parent. And yet that can lead the other parent to being in the dark about stuff, or feeling left out or uncommunicated to. So it's a real tricky one to navigate that, isn't it?
It's really, really tricky to navigate. And again, just keep talking with the children and say, we've all got this WhatsApp group. Are you happy for me to pop it on there? Or they might say, no, can you speak to mum or dad just separately, please? I don't want my other step parent to be involved in this. And that's okay too. It's not excluding the step parent. It's nothing. It's so similar to if I was going through a tricky time, I might speak to one of my girlfriends, but I might not speak to another because I don't want everyone else knowing.
Yeah.
It's not dissimilar to that, really.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about the howlers and the mistakes. Tell me about the wins. How do you get wins in a blended family situation so you don't get labelled as the wicked stepmother or whatever, or the awful stepdad?
It's interesting. I think the win, sometimes you can not see the wins, or you don't realise they're wins. So for me, for our youngest, she really wanted me to come to parents' evening, and I was kind of concerned about that. And she said, don't worry, I've sorted it. Mum's coming at the really early and you're coming really late. I was like, brilliant. 9 o'clock on a weekday. And I was thinking, okay, we'll come along to parents' evening. And what I didn't realise was that she really wanted me to meet her friends. She had talked about me and she wanted me to meet her friends. And at the time, I didn't realise what a win that was and how important it was for her. So I think it's really important to, again, I was consistent. I was reassuring. I set boundaries. I'm not draconian by any stretch of the imagination, but they always knew when they came to us how things were, and nothing changed. Everything was kind of safe and reassuring. So for me, that's what enabled us to have the wins, I think.
Yeah. And what, in that scenario, what do you say to the other parent, the mum in that, the biological mum in that scenario, who has got her child, who wants obviously mum to come, but also wants you to come as well? Does that create feelings of jealousy in biological mum? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it can create a lot of jealousy, and it's almost like, rather than the child saying you're not my mum, it's the mum saying you're not my child's, not my child's mum.
You're not my child's mum. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, oh, hang about. I'm not, I'm just trying to be a supportive adult figure to your child, and I really accolade that, but I can realise that can be really hurtful. But again, it's about looking at why your child wants that step parent there, and again, if, as much as it might irk you, is to go, okay, this is my stuff. This is not about what's going on for my child wanting that step parent there. I might not like it, but you know what? If it makes them feel okay or good, then I'm just going to have to sit with that. But I'll talk to someone else about how I don't like it, and I think that's important.
Yeah, so you take it somewhere else.
Yeah, really important to do that.
Because I guess the way that I look at it is, for me, the more people that love my children, the better. You can't have too much love, can you? So I hope that that's something that I can hold on to, that the more people that love them, the better for them, the more chance they've got of becoming rounded adults if more people are interested in their growth and development. But it's hard sometimes, I know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because, what I might bring as a stepmom, their mum might not do. We're completely different people with different personalities. And again, they might learn something that their natural mother may not have had an interest in. So I think, it's definitely about enabling them to become a more rounded person. And like you said, it's giving your person love. I'd rather that they knew they were being loved when they went to the other house than, fighting with someone all the time. I think that would be really difficult.
Yeah. And we mentioned Christmas earlier, and obviously it's approaching, and who knows, I think we've got some vague guidance on what we are and aren't allowed to do at the moment. But is there any special advice for co-parenting around Christmas that you have for people?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I like to say is, when you see the adverts or the Christmas cards or whatever it is, they're actors. The actors have been paid to create that scene, and on a Christmas card that has been drawn or designed by, on a computer. So try not to have too high a bar as to what Christmas needs to be like or should be like. Maybe just pick a couple of things that you would like to ideally achieve over Christmas. It might be whether it's playing a game or something like that. But I would say Christmas is really stressful in a nuclear family, and with a blended family, you have got the added nuances, so my husband and his ex-wife are Danish, and so Christmas Eve is Danish Christmas Day. And to be honest, by Boxing Day, I never quite know what day of Christmas it is, but there was always, for me, I wanted to celebrate Christmas Day on English Christmas Day. And so we would alternate it in the end and have Christmas Eve would be Danish Christmas Day, and then the next year would be English Christmas Day on the 25th. But again, it's noticing that you may particularly you've always had a certain Christmas a certain way. You may have your turkey or non-turkey, or suddenly your new partner's vegan, but actually your children really like a turkey. And it's about, allowing yourself to go, okay, how can we enable everyone to have a bit of Christmas that they would like to have, as opposed to putting too much pressure on yourself for Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? It's bad enough as it is without adding in more and more stress. Absolutely. Okay. Well, look, I mean, you've given us some amazing tips and advice and shared some, really personal insights, and thank you for that. How can people find out more about the work that you do?
They can come to my website, which is www.yourspacetoday.com, or I'm on Facebook, Your Space Today, and I'm also on Instagram at Your Space Today also.
Fantastic. And I mentioned your book in the intro. What's the name of the book if people want to buy?
It's called When Families End and Blend.
Oh, great. Well, listen, thank you so much, Sophia. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I really appreciate it.
Of course, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Kate_Daly, and you can subscribe or listen to more of our podcasts at thedivorcepodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening.